Hello, my creative friend. Do not forget that on Wednesdays we have bite-sized videos, a dose of inspiration to help you on your creative journey, aside from these longer form episodes on Mondays. And also, thank you very much for clicking that like button right now before you minimize the tab and get to your creative work. Now go create something amazing and enjoy the episode. Your Creative Push, episode 365.
I was burning out a lot faster because I wasn't doing something that was true to who I was.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngmin Brown, and my guest today is Carla Grace. Carla is a self-taught wildlife artist, originally from South Africa, but currently living in Australia. And she comes on the show today to talk about how she was originally drawn to wildlife art, how she attempts to make a communication between the animals she paints and the viewer, and why she always starts with the eyes. She shares her take on Tiger King and zoos in general, how she balances motherhood with creating art, and why she doesn't rely on fixes for energy or for inspiration. Carla tells the story of how she got her idea for her new series, The Uninvited, why she includes written narrative as an addition to each piece of her art, and how she plans her next painting while working on her current one. And finally, Carla shares how commissions were detrimental to the direction that she wanted to go in her art career, the importance of being transparent with people, and her top business tips for artists. This was a really fun conversation to have. Not only is Carla an incredibly talented artist, but she also has a keen business sense. So I know you're going to get not just a lot of inspiration, but a lot of actionable tips for your art as a business as well. So without further ado, please give it up for my guest today, Carla Grace. Carla, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to have you on from the other side of the world. Like I said, I appreciate you taking your Friday night to join us. And I know you said it's easier for you, and maybe we can get into why that is based on the new developments in your life.
Timing. Yeah.
Before we get there, though, maybe you could sort of lay the groundwork and tell everybody who you are and sort of how you got here, creatively speaking, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. So my name is Carla Grace. I'm a wildlife artist. I'm based in Australia, and my thing that I do is creating beautiful, realistic wildlife acrylic paintings. I do work with oil paint as well, but at the stage of my life with having an infant in the studio, I don't work with solvents. So I'm really working on perfecting how I use acrylic to create those just stunning images that really pay respect to wildlife as best as I can. Yeah,
and they are beautiful. So beautiful that you think you're actually looking at nature. So you've got an incredible talent. Did you always do that type of art?
Well, I started off with portraiture, I think, because that's just what you're most drawn to when you're sort of figuring it out. And I didn't find it really challenging in terms of like having any great ideas with how to take portraiture and do something new and interesting with it, because it's been so well done throughout history. Looking at wildlife, not only because I've grown up in Africa and have this sort of instinctive connection to it, I found wildlife to be an area in the art world that has a big gap around it in terms of conversation. Just in general throughout history, wildlife art doesn't really feature as much. So I saw that as an opportunity to give something and hopefully bring it into a bit of conversation. So I guess it's something that's going to develop throughout my career, but I'm excited to see how I do it and where it goes.
Yeah, I am too. Now, can you talk a little bit about like the love for animals? Like, where did that stem from?
Yeah, so I was born in South Africa and grew up in Zimbabwe, which we fled to New Zealand from, and then moved to Zambia. So a lot of my childhood was based in a few different countries throughout Africa, but wildlife was always that sort of core love of mine, pretty much from my childhood in Zimbabwe, just because of the time. It was in the 90s and it was before things sort of became too hectic. So wildlife still had quite open borders, I like to call it, between areas. They weren't sort of concentrated into national parks at that stage. So my love for wildlife has just come from having a daily experience with animals that you typically only now see in national parks and zoos. So I was very lucky as a child to have that, and that's just translated into the work that I create today.
Just on a side note, like what's your take on zoos, putting animals in that type of environment?
Oh, that's such a complex discussion, isn't it?
It is.
I mean,
yeah.
You've had the whole Netflix series that have come up about the Tiger Kings, and that's such a complicated discussion, obviously, because you've got animals that have been born and raised in captivity and that are being bred in captivity to continue that. I think my issue is with the capture of wild animals and taking them out of their families into a captive life. I am all for protected national parks. I don't think that there's a way for animals to survive in the wild without it. In Adelaide, there's a beautiful zoo. It's really called a safari park, but I guess by definition it's called a zoo, called the Monarto Zoo, and I work with them quite closely in terms of using those animals, like photographing those animals and painting them. It's the largest zoo in the world. It's like a national park, but all the different species are obviously sectioned off so that you can't have lions running through, doing what they do. So that's set up for a zoo where, the enclosure for the lion fits a typical zoo in it 3 times, where they can display natural behaviors and do things that they would naturally do. That setup for a zoo I love, because you can still, people can still become educated about wildlife and experience it and grow in their love for the animals and the environment through that experience without it being like a prison for the animals. So it's such a catch-22. It's so complicated. It's a whole hour in itself, even more.
Right.
I think that the commercial profiteering off of animals, like the cub petting and things like that, that doesn't sit very well with me. But then you've got, there's the market for it. So who's in the wrong there? Is it the people providing the product or the people buying the product, or is it, how do you police that, and how do you kill that because you make it illegal and you get a black market for it? So it's it's so complex. It's like you take away one thing and it opens up another thing, and I don't know. I look at the whole problem and I just don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those too big type of problems where just it
is.
You just want to go to sleep.
It is. I mean, it's the history though, because it's right back to the Roman Empire where they were using wild animals for entertainment and exotic pets. You're looking at it, it's just so deep. Yeah.
Yeah, I ask you because my wife is vegan. I am now vegetarian, slowly transitioning to vegan, and we've had this discussion the past 2 summers because my nieces wanted to go to the zoo, and we're like, should we? We just don't know where we stand. It's it's so interesting that you say that you don't know where you stand too, because we also don't.
Yeah, it's so hard because you look at the love, just the absolute awe that a kid has when they see a lion for the first time up close, and you think that is going to turn into love, that can turn into passion, that can grow something. So it's I don't know, it's just so hard to find that balance.
Well, does that kind of seep into your work then? Is that a way for you to?
Yeah, I try. That's why I work realistically, because I want people to experience, I don't know, something from that love that I have for wildlife. So that's why I work so hard on the expression, that it just has to feel alive. Like there's just something about it that people need to feel on a deeper level rather than just a visual, oh, that's a pretty painting. Like I want them to look into the eyes of the animal and see something behind there, like a process, a thought, an instinct that sort of connects as well. Like there's a communication, like a conversation between the viewer and the animal. So that's important. Yeah.
Right. Right. And well, a couple ways I can go with this, but you mentioned looking into the eyes, and I guess that this is a good time to mention that because I've read that you start with the eyes.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I don't know if it was just a fascination with trying to get it to look real in my childhood and then through my like high school, university, but I was always studying eyes, just an obsession with getting it to have that beautiful expression, depth, moisture, the emotion. So it's not just the eyes; it's the muscles and how the face forms around the eyes, and getting to know. So even if I find a reference photo, but the expression isn't quite right, I'll still be able to create that expression from how I've trained myself in just how to get the eyes to look good. So if I don't get the eyes right, like at the moment, I'm working on a new piece and it's very close on the border of I'm either going to get this expression or I'm going to scrap the entire thing. So if I can't get that expression, I'll start again or choose a completely different reference photo or change the entire tactic. It's sort of the pivotal thing. And I'll always do the eyes first because there's no point in spending a month painting something and then you get to the eyes and it's just a disaster. Then you lose a month of painting. So at least this way, it's not a complete waste of time if I need to rethink the tactic.
Right. And how often has that happened where you've not been able to kind of nail the eyes or nail the expression and get it exactly as you see in your mind, and then you have to scrap it and start over or try something new, as you said?
I'm not too sure, actually. Like, that's a good question because it's sort of everything to me is very experimental. So I take an idea and I find photographs that will help me put that idea together on the canvas. So it won't just be one portrait of an animal. For example, the chimpanzee that I just finished painting, that was created from like 15 different reference photos of chimpanzees. So everything, like till I finish the painting, is experimental. So if I have to use different photo, like from what I was using, if I have to change my idea, it's sort of all part of that process. So creating the eyes, it's just the first part of what becomes the process that I use for the entire painting. So reanalyzing and readjusting, it's sort of part of what I do. I'm not too fussed whether or not I have to paint over it and start again. I think I've only created one painting where I absolutely hate it and I haven't put it up for sale. I will not sell it. I'm going to paint over it at some stage when I have the time. That's only happened once, and it was during last year when I was pregnant. I was horrifically sick from day one to finally getting her out, and it was during
that's one way to put it.
Just get out. It was during just a very, very dark time, and I was creating artwork for an exhibit, and I just needed to do one more painting, and I just didn't have it in me, but I created this painting, and I wish I didn't, because it was a painting that I now look at and I think, no, I don't like it. I'm not going to sell it. I wish it never happened.
I got you. I think we've all had that. And I want to pull on that thread, but first I want to finish up this discussion about the eyes because it fascinates me, especially when you're thinking like artists are thinking about, the blank page. So like exactly how much thought have you put into the expression that you want before you kind of put paint to paper? Like, is it like, do you have in your head kind of the overall theme of like what you want it to look like, or does it like kind of surprise you? Like, do you surprise yourself with what the eye says?
I have a general goal. So I'd never really paint anything to be fierce. So if because that's just not, I just don't have that sort of feeling about animals. It's, so if the expression sort of, if it's either blank, if it's fierce, if it looks sick, like malnourished or anything like that, if something about the expression is anything other than like big expression, like power, curiosity, some deep emotive, like just, I don't know, you feel it. If I don't, I guess it's the feeling that I get overall from the expression. If I don't get that, then I'll just keep working, and I keep working. I think the longest time I've spent on an expression, like just trying to get it right until I finally did, was around about 10 days. So that's maybe over 100 hours on just the expression.
Okay, so let's actually pull on that thread you were talking about when you were pregnant.
Yeah.
And you said you were like horrifically sick, and you still kind of pushed through. Like, what lessons did you learn in that about like creating when you are maybe not feeling it? Because I know you are a workhorse, and you've talked about, like, you just had an AMA on Instagram where you mentioned how like you don't drink too much coffee. You just like have a cup, maybe 2 cups of coffee, and then you just get to work and you just keep going, and you got to do it.
Yeah.
So what is the balance there? Like, when have you found that, like, okay, my body's telling me no, I have to stop, and then like when do you just like push through it? Like, stop being lazy, Carla. Like, gotta get to work.
Yeah, I think knowing yourself is pretty key in that, knowing whether or not you're someone that has discipline or not. And I mean, it regardless of whether or not you're someone with discipline, if you've recognized that you have a tendency to be lazy, like, that's awesome. You've recognized it, work on that. So recognize when you're just procrastinating, and then, go, oh, okay, what do I want to achieve in tomorrow's version of who I am? Is procrastinating today going to make who I want to be tomorrow proud? That's pretty much the basic gist of how I think. Because I recognized during my teenage years that I'm pretty happy to just sit on a couch and watch Friends and relax when what looks too hard has to be done. And I recognized that, and I hated it about myself. So as soon as I realized that I had the tendency to feel a bit sorry for myself, like, oh, I had a long week, I don't feel like doing that right now. But knowing that if I did it now, I would actually be really into it and enjoy the experience. And then especially tomorrow, I would be super proud of myself. It's the same with exercise. You don't feel like doing it today, but if you do it today, tomorrow, you're just a little bit fitter, like you're one step closer. So when I was pregnant, I think I really discovered what my limits are. I discovered just how deep you got to dig to really make something happen. If what you want is bigger than how you feel in that moment. So I was vomiting 5 times a day would have been a good day, and I battled with depression, and I had this exhibit to work towards, which initially, 20 paintings for this exhibit would have been easily achievable for me. I was lucky to get 12 pieces out for this exhibit, and that was in 6 months. So productivity for me during that time really took a dip, and that hit me quite hard because I like to see results. Like, I'm just results orientated, and I want to get stuff done. I think it's just a drive factor now, because I know what I can achieve when I put my mind to it. When I don't achieve that, it gets me a little bit more motivated to push even harder, which can be quite unhealthy. So there's a balance there of recognizing what my limits are and when I just need to stop. So like this week was a perfect example. Emily is 10 months old now, and she's been having a bit of a rough week. She's got an ear infection and just a bit of a chesty cough. And so she's been not herself. She's really clingy. She's not sleeping well. So I'm obviously not sleeping well and not able to do what I want to do in my week. And it gets to the point where I have to say stop to my ambition. Like I just have to let it go and say, I need to be here right now with Emily. Like this is more important. And tomorrow I'll start it again and see how we go. So every day is different. And it's now, like ages ago, someone told me, oh, you're having a baby. Now your career better be fourth on your priority list. And it's not about priorities at this stage. It's really just a balance, because Emily loves it when I'm working. She's right in there. She's helping me with the camera, and she's trying to use the paintbrush on the tabletop like I'm using it on the canvas. You know, she's engaged in a proactive way, in a creative way with me when I'm working and, you know, trying to do things, even though it slows me down. I've had to just readjust and get to know what her limits are as well as mine. And when a little sleep is not enough sleep, when I just have to stop and recenter, and when I can actually push myself a little bit more, and then for how long I can do that. So I have a rule that I do not work on the weekend. So there is always time for me to reset and then be fresh again for the new week. So even though this week I haven't got much artwork done at all, it's been a demanding week just because of everything else going on in the background. And it's not because one thing's a priority over the other. It's just because the balance of the week has shifted more towards looking after Emily and myself rather than working hard on a painting or things like that. So, yeah.
I love that answer, because that's something that, I mean, we've been talking about on the show, I guess because I've been struggling with that too, like figuring out how to take breaks, and not even just like how to take breaks, but just like giving yourself the permission to take breaks.
Exactly.
And like I took like a really long break from the podcast, like a multi-month break,
Nice.
because like I was just living in burnout for so long, and I just needed that long of a break.
Yeah.
So like it seems backwards when you're thinking about it, but like when you do get to like your body and your heart kind of are telling you, all right, like time to take a break and time to like focus on other aspects of life, even if that aspect is simply just resting and not doing anything.
Yeah.
Listening to that is going to actually save you more time from the eventual just crash that you're going to have.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's about prevention, I guess, preventing that big burnout, because I also had that. So even though I get to Saturday and like we might not be doing anything Saturday night or something, and I go, oh, I could do just a little bit more, I'll absolutely not let myself do it, because I know that if I'm working 7 days a week, I will get to that point where I have to take 2-3 weeks off because I'll just burn out. And that is unproductive in the long run, even though, you know, I'm getting a lot done in that week where I'm doing 7 days a week. It's going to backfire and hurt me. So I do have like a routine that I will exercise every day. I don't drink energy drinks. I will not allow myself to rely on a fix or something that is just like a big hit of energy and then you experience the slump. So I don't chase that high in anything. So even in my work, I won't chase that high of inspiration, because that's only a momentary experience, after which you've got this big void. And it's that void that you have to push through as a creative person and still keep creating as if you were on that high. So the search for that high is, I think, quite toxic, I think, to get in that mindset of, oh, if I just had the inspiration, then I would do that. Or, oh, if I just had that burst of energy, I would get that done. You're relying on something that's outside of your control to make something happen that is within your control.
That is profound. Like that's so true. I never really thought of it like that. Even so yesterday I was running late to work and I didn't have time to make coffee for myself, and it was completely fine. But I've been telling myself
it's amazing you can get through the day without a coffee.
It was completely fine. It's so funny, like the story that you tell yourself, like, all right, like I can't, hold on, I can't have a conversation until I've had my coffee, or like,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
like all stories that you tell yourself, and like the more that you reinforce that story,
Yeah.
the more you actually sort of
You
need
believe
that
it.
thing or think
Yeah.
that you need it. Yeah,
Yeah. But like there is also the balance on doing something for yourself in that day. So for me, having a coffee or even just a piece of chocolate or having an extra long shower while Emily's asleep, doing that key something for you that you get that emotional, homely feeling from that just makes you feel good inside. That I think is also important in the process. So like you can't just only work all the time or only look after the kids all the time and not have that little something for you that it's like just your cheeky little I did this for me, like this is my selfish little thing, like I deserve this. So but at the same time it's also got to be healthy. So it can't be a behavior that is detrimental in the long term. So like coffee, that's beautiful, have a coffee, enjoy your coffee, but a little bit more dangerous substances probably I would avoid.
for sure.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be amazing if you can like take one of those things that's like you said, like your little Zen moment, maybe make it actually a Zen moment, like a
Yeah,
meditation, like for like 10 minutes, and like find some quiet, and then like
absolutely.
get into your art, or whatever it may be,
Yeah,
like to find some, like you said, like some healthy substitute to put in there for your energy drink. I think might
absolutely.
give you even more energy and no
Yeah,
crash.
absolutely. Yeah, anything that gives you that void after the high, I just I have a thing I just avoid, because getting out of that void, I know like for myself that just the tendency to think, oh, I've just been working so hard, I'll just stop. Even though when you look at it, no, you just got a lot done because you had a lot of energy, because you had a high sugar energy drink. Like you don't deserve that lull there. You were just under the illusion that you were actually, doing something, where really you would have behaved like that if you had a steady energy output. So there's a lot of healthy thinking that goes on behind the scenes in my sort of daily life. I try and keep a healthy, balanced diet. I exercise every day. I do what I can to keep my metabolism high in a healthy way so that it's a constant source of energy.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
And I also love what you said about having your weekends blocked off. And
Mm.
that's something that my wife and I just sort of made a rule about recently. Okay, no work on the weekends.
Yeah.
And what you said about, where you're like, oh, I could just do a little bit. I
Mhm.
think that's like a really important point, because I think for like when we talk about, and you actually mentioned this before too, like the desire or like the impetus to not do work, like not
Yeah.
wanting to sit down and do the work, is often like the thoughts are often worse than once you actually sit down. It's like you can very quickly get into that zone, especially if you've been in the zone before, and making art or whatever your creative
Yeah.
passion
It's
is
amazing how
becomes much easier.
self-destructive, how self-destructive we can be, because it's like
Hmm.
that you love creating, like it's your passion, it's what you love doing. So like I love painting, like just sitting down and just painting all those millions of tiny little hairs. I just love it. There's a zen there, and getting off the couch to actually do that is far less demanding and it's so much more rewarding when I actually get there. And I think, oh, I'm so glad I did this. So it's amazing how we self-sabotage, and at the end of the day we look back and we think, well, why did I even question this?
Right. But and at the same time, it's like when you put that rule in place for yourself for the weekend to not do it, it's so easy to think that you're only going to do work for, a couple minutes,
Yeah.
maybe half an
Yeah.
hour, but like we're all creative people and we get into that zone and just keep going and keep going. So
Yeah.
it's like you're lying to yourself saying that you're only
Yeah.
going to spend 15 minutes or 30 minutes, doing
Yeah.
it. It's easy to just keep
Yeah. And then
going.
I find it frustrating that I then have to stop because I got in the zone.
Mm.
So it's like this weird
It's like something's being
cycle.
taken from you.
Yeah. Like, how rude, husband. I don't want to.
Definitely been there.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh,
Well, you mentioned having that Zen doing the fur, and you have a tutorial actually about painting realistic fur. Why like niche down that far? Like, you know what I mean? Instead of, like how to draw a lion.
Yeah.
Why niche down to fur?
Well, it's pretty simple. You teach a man to fish, he can feed his family for a whole life, that sort of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you, but I look for something that will tell me exactly how to do what I'm trying to do. And it's impossible to provide that to everybody. So like everyone wants to know how to paint a snow leopard, and you create that tutorial. And then, okay, now I want to learn how to paint a lion. So you create that tutorial. And then, okay, now I want to know how to paint a cheetah. And it's like, well, you merge all those together and it's the same principles. So let me teach you the principle behind painting the fur, which creates 90% of what you're trying to paint. And you can create all three of those things for the price of one tutorial. So I'm not just trying to teach people how to paint really well with acrylic paint. I'm teaching them the thinking behind it and how they can actually take these basic principles. And a lot of my students have done that. They've gone, this is an amazing tutorial. I'm actually applying it to my landscapes and my portraiture and floral painting. So it's not just about creating wildlife paint. It's using the mediums and the materials to create things better, like just new techniques, just better. The thinking behind it is not, I don't want to teach people just how to do one thing. I want to teach them how to improve their entire practice. So my goal is to create, 3 or 4 tutorials a year, because there's a lot that goes into them. And so the next one's going to be feathers. And then the next one's going to be eyes after that. So it's not so like when I do the tutorial on eyes, I'm not just going to say, okay, and then this is where you put light and this is where you put dark. I'm going to teach people how to look at an eye and see the expression that they want to, like how to create that expression. So what's the structure behind that? What is it that you've seen that has actually created that expression? And how can you put that onto a reference photo that doesn't have that? So there's more of the background, the principles and the thinking that goes into the tutorials rather than just do this and you'll get that. It's, far more complex than that.
No, I imagine.
Yeah.
And did it change the way you look at how you do fur, if that makes sense? Like
breaking it down into a process.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was actually a little bit more surprised by how simple it actually looks when I explain it. Because I think before you put something down, like into a graph or you write down your thoughts, like it feels all jumbled, like there's an incoherence to it. So up till the point where I actually wrote down the process and broke it down layer by layer, like to me, I was like, I don't know how I can teach this. Like, it's just so complicated. It's all over the place. Like,
you just do it.
Yeah, I just do it. Like, you just copy the photo. But it's like when you actually film it and then you rewatch it and you edit it and you break down each layer and you actually see it, like it's like a third person perspective on Carla busy painting this. Like I'm looking at it through the eyes of the person that's trying to learn it. And I was actually amazed by how simple it was. Like once you understand the principle, it's really simple. And so I was like, there's no other way to teach a person how to paint wildlife rather than like the principle behind it. It's actually amazingly simple when it's in a systematic, easy to understand format. Yeah. So I found it surprising.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Now, one of my listeners, Craig, actually sent me to you. And I asked him if he had any questions for you. And he was wondering where your idea for your new series came from. And perhaps like any trepidation you had about bringing the series to life.
Yeah.
Like seeing that it's sort of a departure from, your previous collections.
Good question. I see every stage as training for the next one. So everything I've been doing up till now has been, I guess, a training platform for where I want to take my work. And then even what I'm doing now is going to be training for the next thing. So I've been formulating this series in my mind for, I think, the past 2 years, more so because I just felt like just portraiture of wildlife, it's awesome, but I felt like it had a dead end. Like there was no further conversation around it, and like it was just a beautiful portrait of a lion. Like that's amazing. I feel its presence in the room. Like that's fantastic. Tick, I've done it. Now I want to go further than that. And I didn't know how to do it. And so I tried so many different ideas, like behind the background, just like pulling my hair out. How do I take wildlife art into a new level that creates conversation, that has humor, that has a little bit more going on? Because I don't like to make the animals do things that's not natural to them. So I don't want to, like someone said, you should make the animals do like karate and stuff like that. Like I'm not into that. I want things to still be realistic. Like I want to see animals in their true form. It's just what I like. So how do I do that? That isn't just simply a replica of a photograph, like what a photograph could easily capture, like a lion taking down a zebra, things like that. Like I'm not going to try and do that. I want it to be a painting. Like, so what can I do that puts together things that wouldn't normally be in a photograph? Like how do I create something that's beyond a photograph, like photorealistic, but it's also a surreal thing, because like you wouldn't have a chimpanzee in your house having tea with you, sort of a thing. Like that's not a realistic scenario. Or you wouldn't have tigers ripping up your kitchen to get to the lamb chops, sort of a thing. Like that's just not going to happen, normally. So I wanted to try and capture things like there's always going to be the blending of human and animal. So I didn't want to do that. That would be like a blatant call for conservation. Like that's sort of the undertone of every wildlife painting. I don't feel like it's something that I have to illuminate with every painting. It sort of goes without saying. So I was just playing with how do I do this? And so eventually it came down to my technical ability and my understanding of lighting and form to be able to actually put all these elements together to make it look believable without it being cheesy or like, oh, that doesn't look like it's supposed to go there, or things like that. So this series just came from a lot of failed attempts at trying to do the same thing and then finding a way to do something that makes sense. The idea of it being a narrative and something that I will eventually then put into like a really cool storybook at the end, like a limited edition storybook, that sort of happened spontaneously. I don't know, I just had the brain idea, just came to me one day and I was like, oh, this would be a really cool book. So like the painting that I'm starting now, our hostess, which is the viewer, they're creating orange and rosemary lamb chops. So like even the recipe that this person would be using will end up in the book as well. So the conversation going on, because there are going to be now 2 tigers. So now the interactions are a little bit more complex. So there's the interaction between each tiger, as well as between the host and the animal. So they're slowly adding more and more layers until eventually I would love to, like, almost like the Last Supper without it being a cliche, like just a huge party of all these different animals. And then, I don't know, just be like mayhem. I don't know what it's going to look like or how it's going to go, but I can just see that it's just this big party and it's just a disaster. It's just chaos.
Love it. And so you do, like you said, there is a narrative, but there's like actually a narrative, like where you write like a sort of paragraph describing the scene. Does that come out as you're painting? Like, are you telling that story to yourself, or is that like something you developed before?
No, it's something that happens while I'm painting or afterwards when I look at the artwork. And then like organically, there's been this third part to the narrative where it's actually what has unintentionally come out of the painting. So like the first one that I did, the lion with the wine and the bread, I didn't intend for it to have any sort of spiritual symbolism, but a lot of people have come out and say, oh, that's the Lion of Judah, with the the wine and the bread, and it's so there's a lot more that goes on after the painting has been put together. And so I don't often know what the narrative is going to be until it's all together. Like I have a general idea, and when I'm selecting photographs, I sort of have an idea of what I'm wanting, but I don't want to put that in a box. I want it to have like loose ends that I don't know how it's going to tie up at the end. So I just can go with it and let it develop on its own as well. Like I don't want it to be too rigid and then it feels forced.
Right. No, that makes sense. Now, how has your following reacted to the change?
Yeah,
to
good.
This new series?
Yeah. I think, well, I was getting bored with, another portrait where there's nothing else going on. And I had quite a lot of actually negative emails from people saying, what's the point in your artwork? What's the point? Like it's a photograph, like there is no point. And even though, haters going to hate whatever, but there is actually some truth to that. Like I do want there to be another layer, even though I'm not a conceptual artist. Like the visual impact of the painting to me is the most important thing. Like if it's not visually beautiful and if it doesn't stand on its own, just on its visual quality, then I don't know, that's not really going to work for me, because I don't want people to be like, what the heck is that? Like, what's going on there? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I want people to look at it and be like, this is this is also what's happening. And then they read the title and then they read the thing and they go, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I can see it. So I want it to all support, like, just be this nice, tight little package that holds everything together and it just fits. So I'm sort of just waiting to see how it develops and go from there.
Yeah, I like that. It's like finding ways to add layers to whatever it is that you're creating. So it's like you can't just get the whole, well, you can get something from, just looking at it for like 2 seconds and then scrolling to the next picture or whatever it is. But if you dive deeper, it's like you can dive into deeper layers of the story that you're trying to sell.
The layers are there for the people that want to dive deeper, but the visual impact is there for people who just want to look at a cool picture. Like I'm happy with either or. I'm not trying to force anything onto anybody. Like it's just you can see what you want to see. You can get to know as much as you want to get to know. It's up to you. Take your time.
Right.
So, yeah.
You mentioned each thing that you do being training for the next one. Is that ever like a danger? Could you go a little bit deeper into that? Because like, does that ever become dangerous then? Like when you're thinking about the next one, that you can't be sort of present in the piece that you're creating at the moment?
There can definitely be a danger in that you lose the essence of what you're doing in the moment. I think that also that comes into balance with needing the inspiration to create the artwork. So over time, creating the paintings for me has become, this sounds really horrific. It's a to-do list for me at the moment. So inspiration for me, that creativity is in the thinking behind the painting. So once I've planned the painting, I just have to do it. So the actual doing for me it's a to-do list. I get there and I do this today and I do this tomorrow. So the physical act of painting doesn't occupy the space in my brain that it used to. So I'm talking about a progression of efficiency in my work. So right at the start, I was very much involved in the artwork. It occupied everything. So now that the process isn't as consuming as the thinking behind it. So while I'm working on the painting, I've already thought about how I want it to go. And then like obviously the analytical side as I work, that sort of happens on autopilot and I adapt the painting as I work. But in terms of planning for the next thing, that sort of happens without me controlling it really. I just get these ideas as I work, and then that's for either the next piece or the next series or the next milestone that I want to reach, or, you know, the bigger game that I'm playing, like over and above it all. So like my thinking, it just sort of, it's on all these different tangents. If I get to the end of a painting and I don't know what I'm going to do next, that to me is more dangerous, because then I'm like a fish out of water. Like I don't have the next thing to move on to straight away. Like I'm not someone who finishes a painting on Wednesday and takes the rest of the week off. I start the next one. Like if I finish it at 10 o'clock in the morning, I'll start making the next one happen as soon as I put the brush down. Like there's no rest time in between. I'm just, as soon as I have those ideas, I just want to start putting it together and seeing it come to life, because to me, that's why I do what I do. I want to create and I want to paint. So it's not a process that relies on that creative inspiration to actually make it happen. So thankfully I'm at a point now where the process of creating that vision is sort of, it's a zen, it's an autopilot thing. Like I know what I'm doing, and I don't have to really spend a lot of energy on the actual physical process behind the brushwork. My brain just goes off on a tangent while I'm busy doing that.
That's fascinating, because I was going to say, like, when you make that sort of to-do list, like, I was like, well, then you don't have any ability to be kind of surprised or, like, go off in different directions when you're doing the work.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating because, like, making that to-do list, it's like that then clears your brain up to allow you to sort of have that time to think about what's next, but still be present in the moment. It's sort of genius.
I think it's also the art style though. So my like realism, I'm just copying a photograph. Like I know it sounds like that just sounds oversimplified, but that's really like I'm just copying what I see in the photograph. Lately, I've been able to go beyond that, but up till maybe 6 months ago, going past what I see in the photograph hasn't really been something I've been able to do like mentally. Whereas now, like with the lighting and things like that and the expressions and stuff, I can create what I don't see in the photograph. But I'm still essentially, everything's in front of me. Like I'm just copying. It's a very mechanical, and I actually had like a concept about that. I was like, realism, it's one of the only art forms that's almost not about the artist. It's so much about the process, and like it's almost like a robotic, just copying what you see in the photograph. Like there's no real input from the artist in terms of like color interpretation or form like there's rules around how the artist works with what they're doing. If you're going to create something to look realistic, like it has to look realistic. So it's like there's almost a removal of the artist from the process, which to me is awesome, because I can't create something out of my brain to save my life. So I think it's definitely the form of art that allows me to do that. So like if I was doing interpretive art or conceptual art that required like massive amounts of my emotional creative intelligence to just channel through the brush onto the canvas, like I think that's really different again, because that's coming from the artist, like from the very fiber of the artist. Whereas what I'm doing, it's a technical process of, that's what I see, there's a hair there, so I'm going to go put a hair there. Like there's no real input from me per se in terms of the process.
Right. And if you had like the mental freedom as you're creating, then maybe you would get crazy ideas like making your lion do kung fu or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Karate, like, as your fans want.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which I think it's important that you don't. Kung Fu Panda.
Yeah. There's something to it.
Now, before we get to the final push, I have to ask you, because you have such a great business mind as an artist, and I think not all artists have that sort of business muscle in their brain.
Yeah.
Would you have like one or two like big tips or insights or aha moments or things that you didn't know at first that you learned along your journey that you could pass on to other artists business-wise?
Yeah. Okay. So something that I didn't realize was going to be sort of the backbone to the business side is having good accounting software. Like, it sounds so boring. I can't think of anything worse than doing numbers. And if you don't have someone that can help you with that, doing a course like this I couldn't think of anything worse, but do a course on bookkeeping and save yourself so much trouble and get, like, I use Xero for my accounting software, and being able
Zero?
to, yeah, Xero, yeah.
Xero,
Yeah.
okay.
But I mean, there's MyOb and all those ones, and just having a system where you can find out the trends, like if you're wanting to track like what is working and what isn't working, where am I putting my time, where is my money going, how much have I, like, being able to see that, to me, I didn't realize just how important it would be in my decision making, and like what to let go and what to carry on with. Like, you can see it in numbers. Like, it sounds horrible. And I know a lot of artists would be like, nah, that's not for me. But I was surprised by just how important that was, like having a basic understanding of finances and setting it up well so that it is something that you can use as a marketing tool. Another thing would be transparency. That's not expected either, but people will give back to you when you give to them. So in today's social world, everything, like, people can see a fake straight away. So being transparent with people, being happy to give people as much as you can give, like there is a balance to it, and then realizing where the value is in what people are wanting. So people will ask you, if people stop asking you for help, then you've got a problem. Like, then you're not approachable. But being someone that people can come to for help, you will soon realize what people are finding valuable about what you do. And so, like, people always asking me about my techniques and processes, I will happily tell them what I can, because it's very hard to, explain a process without showing it. And so I see that there's value in what I'm doing in terms of the process. Like, people want to know how I do what I do. So that's given me a clue as to where I can add value to my entire business model. So adding the tutorials, not only the free ones, but creating something that is so valuable that people will be able to, like, transform their whole practice with it. That's become a whole other avenue to what I do. So being transparent means people are going to feel comfortable to ask you those things so that you can get to know how people are seeing what you're presenting to them and where they're finding that value, and then what you can go and do with that going forward.
Perfect. And when you talk about the accounting, was there any like big surprise to you that, like, oh, this is what's really not working that I never realized?
I think commissions to me were like, even though, okay, so I started off, everything was based on doing commissions. I'd been doing portraiture for friends and family from the age of about 16, for pay. And then eventually strangers started contacting me. And then eventually commissions started to take over more and more of my time. When I left university, I worked full-time as a secretary to pay off my student loan. And commissions eventually started taking up so much of my time that I was able to go part-time in my day job. And then eventually in 2016, I quit my day job and just focused on doing my artwork. But commissions are someone else's vision. It's someone else's artwork, really, because, even though it's a guaranteed sale, it's money straight away. I didn't get much fulfillment out of that. And so I was burning out a lot faster because I wasn't doing something that was true to who I was, if that makes sense. So commissions to me, even though it was a guaranteed sale, it was detrimental to all the other areas that I was trying to pursue because I just didn't have that energy, like that passion to actually think of those ideas that would then grow into something bigger. So I had to sort of, even though, you had the sale, I looked at everything else around that and I saw that the margins in the other areas were better if I could just invest more of myself into it. So there was a strange look at the numbers, but yeah, I'll only do commissions every now and again now. Like it's something that I have to be aware of.
Definitely a good insight to have. Carla, it is time for the final push. And that's where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today and just give them your best final words of advice and push them to pursue their own creative passions.
To be honest, like what you said at the start about giving yourself permission to push those boundaries and like take the reins and just do it. I think because I'm very disciplined in the way I think, I encourage you to just look at yourself and see those areas where you can identify, oh, I have a negative mindset when it comes to that, or people tell me that my artwork is really beautiful or what I create is great, but I don't really want other people to see it. Recognizing the areas in what you do that is stopping you and pushing yourself just a little bit every day to just go past that. Like you'll be amazed to see just what you can achieve once you work with what you can do like naturally and just let that grow, like realizing what it is that's putting the brakes, whether it's a lazy attitude or it's a victim mentality or you don't have the confidence. Like trust those core people around you that tell you what you do is good and just take a little step every day, just a little push, and you'll be amazed what you can achieve.
Absolutely. Carla, thank you so much for taking your Friday night, like I said, giving us your time. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for sharing your story and your advice. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it was so good.
And for everybody listening, you can find Carla and her art at carlagraceart.com. And on Instagram, she is Carla_Grace_art. And we'll have links to those places as well as everywhere else at yourcreativepush.com/Carla Grace. Carla, thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Huge thank you to Carla once again for coming on the show. One major takeaway that I want to leave you with as you go and do your work, and you might see right through it. I got to stop the bad jokes, but it's being transparent. And this is something that I am working very hard on trying to do in my own life and in this podcast as well. Just being honest and upfront about, getting burnout, needing a break, needing to take time off, how I'm feeling, where I'm failing, where I'm not practicing what I preach on this podcast about creativity and getting creative energy and pushing past your resistances. Just trying to be upfront and honest, because that is where the connections are made. They're made in that honesty, in that vulnerability, where people can see themselves through your eyes, through your journey, through your problems, through the things that you're going through, good or bad. But putting your truth out there doesn't just help you to connect to other people, but it also helps you to connect to yourself. As artists, as creative people, we all feel like frauds. We all feel like imposters. But when you're able to be as honest and open and upfront as possible with your audience, you're going to feel like much less of a fraud. And it's going to help you feel more comfortable in your own skin when you get that positive feedback, when you get that confirmation that, yes, other people go through these things too. And yes, other people deal with these life difficulties as well. So keep being transparent, keep putting your truth out there, and keep putting your vulnerable self out there. Your audience is not going to say, aha, we knew it, and come after you, but instead they're going to carry you forward. And speaking of being vulnerable and putting your truth out there, on next week's episode, we have Martha Beck. Martha is a sociologist, a life coach, a best-selling author, and speaker who specializes in helping individuals and groups achieve personal and professional goals, and she certainly did that for me. She's been on the show before, back in episode 215, but she continues the conversation in a powerhouse of an episode, one that every single creative person needs to listen to because she has a powerful message for us. If you don't know about Martha and you want to find out more about her, you can head to marthabeck.com or just go on YouTube or anywhere else and just search Martha Beck. Pretty much everything she says is profound, and she has great advice for any life situation and any topic. I love her dearly. But that's for you next week. That's all I've got for you this week. So hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done. And we will be here for you next week if you need that push again. I love you all so much. And remember that the universe needs your creations, and you are the universe. We'll see you next time. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to subscribe to YCP on your favorite podcast app. Or better yet, join the newsletter, where you'll get each week's episode, YouTube video, inspirational resources, and a sneak peek at the following week's guest, all in one weekly email. Again, that's yourcreativepush.com/subscribe.